Welcome back to the Perfectly Homeless podcast. We're jumping right back into the State Homeless Score Project, evaluating our source material for today.
I'm ready.
So, as you know, the treatment and the actual lived reality of homelessness, it varies wildly from state to state. Today, we are building a real-time scorecard for New Mexico.
Right, and we should remind you that the score will start as a draft. It's going to evolve dynamically as we evaluate different systems, so stick around to see where it lands.
Definitely. To really grasp what's happening here, I want you to imagine trying to buy a house, right? But while you're walking up to the bank to sign the paperwork, the required down payment just suddenly jumps by $20,000.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah, and that's not a hypothetical. That is exactly what happened to the housing market in New Mexico over the last 4 years. We are looking at an environment where the fundamental math of survival is just, well, it's breaking down for a massive portion of the population.
It really is. The baseline data coming out of the state is basically a blaring warning siren. According to HUD data, between 2022 and 2023 alone, the unhoused population spiked by 48% statewide.
Almost 50% in 1 year.
Yeah. But when you look at Albuquerque, the major metropolitan hub, that increase was an astounding 83%.
Wait, 83%? Why is it so concentrated there?
Well, we have to look at why that localized spike happens. It's the gravitational pull of centralized services.
Oh, I see.
Right? When rural or suburban safety nets fail across a sprawling state like New Mexico, people naturally migrate to the largest city hoping for a shelter bed, a clinic, or just a sympathetic ear. And this creates an intense bottleneck in Albuquerque that the local infrastructure was just never designed to handle.
That makes a lot of sense, and to ground those percentages into actual human lives, the healthcare system gives us this staggering picture.
The hospital data.
Exactly. Over a 5-year period, from 2019 to 2023, New Mexico hospitals treated nearly 31,000 unique patients who were experiencing homelessness.
31,000 unique individuals.
Just let that sink in. And if you look at the education system, in the 2023 to 2024 school year, over 9,600 public school students in the state were experiencing homelessness. We are not talking about some fringe issue here.
No, not at all.
We are talking about massive segments of the community existing completely outside the bounds of stable shelter.
Yeah, those aren't just community stats, they are systemic warning lights. And that's exactly why we run this data through our 6-category scorecard to see where the circuit is breaking and where it's holding strong.
So let's start right at the source of the problem. Category 1, housing affordability.
The front door.
Exactly. To understand why 9,600 kids are trying to do their homework in cars or motels, we have to look at the front door. How much does it cost just to keep a roof over your head in New Mexico?
Well, the economic realities of the housing market there are, frankly, entirely punishing.
Right.
Rent across the state has risen 70% in recent years.
Wow.
Yeah, and HUD reports that the state is currently short about 40,000 rental units specifically for low-income renters. The supply simply does not exist.
So people literally have nowhere to go.
Exactly. And if you think the solution is just, escaping the rental market by buying a starter home, well, that ladder has been completely pulled up. In 2020, a 20% down payment on a median home in New Mexico was $47,000.
Oh, okay.
By 2024, that exact same down payment jumped to $67,000.
Jeez. That's a huge jump.
And if you look at places like Santa Fe or Los Alamos, a 20% down payment now exceeds $100,000.
That's just impossible for a working family. I mean, let's break down what that actually means. When we talk about area median income, or AMI, we're talking about the midpoint of what people earn in a specific region.
Right.
Right now in New Mexico, 83% of households making under 30% of the AMI are classified as cost-burdened.
Which is a very sterile term for a terrifying reality.
It really is. The mechanism of being cost-burdened means you are spending such a disproportionate, crushing amount of your monthly income on rent that you have zero financial shock absorbers. You are living in a state of constant low-level panic.
So waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. One minor disruption, like a blown tire, a sick day without pay, or, a pediatric urgent care bill, and it means you default on rent. The eviction notices fly, and you lose your lease.
And the construction data really explains a lot of why this supply shortage is so stubborn. Building material costs, things like softwood lumber and commercial steel, they are still hovering well above pre-pandemic levels.
So it costs more to build anything.
Right. When the raw materials are that expensive, developers just pause or scale down their projects. That slows down construction, which artificially keeps the supply of available units incredibly low.
Basic supply and demand.
Exactly. When supply is low while demand remains high, landlords can charge whatever they want, accelerating that treadmill even faster.
Well, this lowers the overall picture significantly right out of the gate. When 83% of your poorest residents are a single flat tire away from eviction, your housing foundation is fundamentally cracked.
Which forces us to look at the immediate fallout.
Right. When a family inevitably slips off that accelerating treadmill because rent jumped another $300, the first stop isn't usually the street, it's the immediate safety net. That brings us to category 2, shelter access. We have to measure if that net is holding or, if it is completely fraying.
Historically, providing that safety net was pushed down to the local city level or relied heavily on federal grants. But the New Mexico state legislature has recognized the crisis and actually stepped into a much larger role recently.
Oh, really? What have they done?
They have appropriated over $500 million for housing and shelter infrastructure over the last 3 years.
$500 million. That's massive.
It is. And we are seeing tangible physical results from this huge cash injection. Albuquerque built the Gateway Center, which includes transitional housing supporting around 200 youth at any given time.
Okay, that's great.
Furthermore, the state's Behavioral Health Services Division is actively funding new shelters in surrounding regions like Valencia, Santa Fe, and Gallup.
To try and stop that migration bottleneck we talked about earlier. Wait, hang on, though. I have to pause you there. If the legislature threw $500 million at this in 3 years, why did Albuquerque's unhoused population still spike by 83%? Where is all that money bottlenecking?
It's a fair question.
Because throwing $500 million at the problem sounds incredible on paper, but the actual lived reality on the ground seems pretty disconnected from that funding.
Well, the friction lies entirely in the complexity of how the money is spent, rather than the amount itself. When you look at the unit cost to build these shelters, the variance is just staggering.
How so?
You have projects like the Farolito Senior Community coming in at $36,000 per unit.
Okay, that seems reasonable.
Right, it's highly efficient, modular, scalable. But then you look at the Wells Fargo Tower project, and the cost balloons to over $350,000 per unit.
Wait, $350,000 for a shelter unit? That makes zero sense. Why is one unit $36,000 and another is almost $400,000?
It all comes down to the mechanics of retrofitting. Trying to turn a massive, vacant commercial bank tower into residential shelter space means completely gutting and re-engineering the HVAC systems, upgrading commercial plumbing to handle hundreds of individual residential bathrooms, overhauling fire suppression codes. It just devours the budget.
Man, it's like trying to solve a city's public transit shortage by buying everyone custom-built luxury sedans instead of just mapping out a functional bus route.
That's a great analogy.
The complexity completely defeats the purpose. And because of that inefficiency, the bottleneck is very real. The source material notes there are currently 45 at-risk youth stuck on wait lists for transitional housing through the state's Children, Youth, and Families Department.
And the tragedy of that specific wait list is the cascading cost of inaction. Analysts estimate that failing to house disconnected youth costs the state roughly $623 million a year in broader societal impacts.
$623 million. Let's explain why that number is so high.
Yeah, please do.
When a teenager is left on the street, they inevitably end up utilizing the most expensive emergency services we have. They end up in the emergency room for preventable environmental exposures, or they get swept up in the juvenile justice system just for trying to survive.
Exactly.
Add in the lifelong loss of tax revenue from disrupted education, and paying for that transitional housing up front is actually vastly cheaper for the taxpayer than ignoring them.
The math heavily favors intervention, without a doubt. But despite the severe inefficiencies and the wait lists, the fact that the state is actively injecting $500 million into the infrastructure, well, it cannot be ignored.
Fair enough. I'd say this shifts the score back up slightly as the funding is visibly there, even if the deployment is highly inefficient. But when those youth or those cost-burdened families hit a full shelter with a massive wait list, they are left with zero options.
Which brings us to Category 3.
Right. Category 3, criminalization and enforcement. When people are forced to exist in public spaces because the safety net is full, how does the state treat them?
This is a highly localized issue that varies wildly by municipality. But since Albuquerque holds the vast majority of the state's unhoused population, their approach really dictates the reality for most people.
And what is their approach?
It leans heavily into aggressive enforcement. The City Council recently passed a highly controversial measure, Ordinance 02456, which strictly penalizes sleeping in public spaces.
Oh, wow, how strict.
Violators are subject to fines of up to $500, and they can face up to 90 days in jail.
I want you to truly process the logic of that ordinance. Imagine being fined $500 when the entire reason you are sleeping on a sidewalk is because you couldn't afford a $300 rent increase.
It's a vicious cycle.
It really is. You are taking the state's most impoverished citizens who already have zero liquid assets and burying them in municipal debt and criminal records.
Now, to be fair to the source material, the rationale presented by the City Council during the hearings focused on the mechanics of municipal management.
How do they justify it?
They argued they must balance the needs of all 560,000 residents, maintaining that while the situation for the 5,000 people on the streets is tragic, the city cannot surrender the usability of public parks and sidewalks.
I mean, I understand the pressure they are under from residents, but from a systemic perspective, this enforcement creates a highly destructive whack-a-mole effect.
Completely.
When you deploy police to clear an encampment under this ordinance, you aren't solving the homelessness, you are just disrupting their survival. Unhoused populations are cited, their tents are thrown away, and they are simply shuffled to another block.
Right, and a few weeks later they return to the exact same spot because, mechanically, they have nowhere else to legally exist.
Exactly. You are spending thousands of taxpayer dollars on police overtime and sanitation crews just to move the problem 3 streets over.
Yeah.
Based on this, the current draft score is taking a heavy hit.
It's definitely dragging the average down.
Let's pause our evaluation of these metrics for a second so we can look at the preliminary score overlay. If you look at the graphic on screen, you'll see our draft score. Currently, it sits at a D+.
And keep in mind, this is not the final score. We still have half the scorecard to evaluate, and how the state handles alternative living situations in healthcare may significantly change this result.
Let's get right back to it then. Category 4, vehicle dwelling friendliness.
A crucial one.
Because to avoid being harassed on the street or handed a $500 citation, many unhoused folks take the only shelter they have left, their vehicles. Is New Mexico friendly to this lived reality?
If you zoom out to the state level, the legal framework is surprisingly lenient.
Really? How so?
Well, state law allows individuals to park at highway rest areas for up to 24 hours within any 3-day period without harassment.
That's pretty rare.
It is. Furthermore, because of the vast geography of New Mexico, there is permissive boondocking allowed on public lands. You can legally park and live in your vehicle on BLM land for 14 days within a 28-day period. Crucially, there is no statewide prohibition on living in an RV full-time.
But the moment you drive that RV off federal public land and cross the city limits, the local reality is much tougher, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Municipal codes are designed to clamp down on vehicle living. In Albuquerque, city ordinances restrict street parking for any vehicle to a strict 36 hours.
So you have to keep moving constantly.
Exactly. And you might think the workaround is to just park on private land, but Albuquerque's development ordinance explicitly states you can only live in an RV on your own private property for 14 days out of the entire year.
Wow, even on your own property.
Yep. Furthermore, you are strictly prohibited from hooking up permanent water or sewer lines to that vehicle.
Man, the tension between vast state leniency and strict municipal codes must be a constant battle for vehicle dwellers.
It is. However, there are localized bright spots actively trying to build alternative infrastructure.
Oh, good. Like where?
Down in Las Cruces, the city adapted to the reality of the crisis by offering a free permit. This permit allows RVs to park legally on designated city streets for up to 6 consecutive days.
That's a huge relief for people.
Definitely. And in Santa Fe, initiatives like Safe Parking Santa Fe, which partners with the Salvation Army, are surveying the community and fighting for safe, legal overnight parking lots.
Because they recognize that a car is a vital asset, right? Towing it is basically a death sentence for a person's ability to get to work.
Exactly.
Compared to other states where vehicles are impounded almost immediately, this raises the overall picture. The state-level leniency and the permit experiments in places like Las Cruces provide actual breathing room.
They do, yeah.
But a safe place to park is just a baseline for survival. To actually escape the cycle, people need active support. That brings us to Category 5, outreach and social services.
And the most fascinating element of New Mexico's outreach strategy is their highly sophisticated systemic tracking.
Oh, yeah, the health data.
Right. The state's Department of Health realized that relying on the annual point in time counts, where volunteers walk around with clipboards one night a year, it drastically undercounts the population.
Obviously.
So they completely changed their methodology. They're utilizing hospital data, through a mechanism called syndromic surveillance.
Let's explain how syndromic surveillance actually works, because this is brilliant public health tracking.
Yeah, go ahead.
When a patient enters an emergency room, hospitals use specific codes for their discharge diagnoses and chief complaints. The Department of Health is aggregating those codes statewide to build a real-time heat map of where unhoused people are suffering.
It's incredibly smart.
It is.
Mm.
This is exactly how they found those 30,882 unique patients we mentioned earlier.
And that data reveals vital, actionable realities. By analyzing the codes, the state tracked specific causes of injury and death among the unhoused population. They identified severe spikes in deaths from environmental cold exposure, firearms, and pedestrian vehicle crashes.
Knowing exactly how and why people are getting hurt allows you to stop guessing and actually deploy targeted services.
Exactly.
And on the ground, the navigation programs look highly robust too. Take this OR program. It specifically helps people with serious mental illness or substance use disorders navigate the notoriously complex process of getting SSI or SSDI benefits.
Which is a nightmare of paperwork.
Oh, completely. If you've ever dealt with federal disability bureaucracy, you know it is nearly impossible to manage while living in a tent. Getting that secure income is a literal lifeline.
It really is. The state also relies heavily on peer-to-peer models. You have Oxford houses, which are self-run, self-supported recovery spaces.
How many of those are there?
There are 17 of these locations spread across Albuquerque and Las Cruces, serving over 150 men, women, and children annually. It provides a structured, democratic environment for recovery without the clinical overhead that often deters people from seeking help.
That's fantastic. This shifts the score upwards, showing a strong, data-driven community safety net.
Definitely.
But as vital as they are, emergency shelters, syndromic surveillance, and disability navigation are ultimately just managing the crisis. Which brings us to our final metric, Category 6, Pathways to Permanent Housing. How is New Mexico building permanent off-ramps from homelessness?
The standout success story for permanent pathways comes from the southern part of the state. It's called Camp Hope down in Las Cruces.
I was reading about this. It's a completely different approach, isn't it?
It really is. Instead of deploying the aggressive enforcement and $500 fines we saw in Albuquerque, Las Cruces tried a completely different municipal approach. Community members and a local nonprofit petitioned the city government for a temporary zoning agreement to allow a legal, sanctioned encampment.
And it worked.
It proved to be so successful at stabilizing people that the city permanently formalized it. Today, Camp Hope is a legally zoned encampment on a 16-acre campus. It is capped at 45 tents and 50 occupants, complete with a mandatory provision for 24-hour bathrooms and permanent potable water.
That is massive. The city council literally changed the underlying zoning laws to accommodate the reality of the crisis rather than fighting a perpetual war against it.
And they didn't stop there.
Wait, there's more.
Oh, yeah. Las Cruces amended their zoning to aggressively incentivize permanent supportive housing for developers. They established a mechanism called ministerial approval for qualified projects.
That procedural changes everything in the development world. Let's break down why ministerial approval is such a game changer.
Sure.
Normally, a new affordable housing project has to survive a brutal gauntlet of public city council hearings where, not in my backyard, protests can stall a project for years.
Decades, sometimes.
Right. Ministerial approval strips all of that away. It means if the developer's blueprint meets the written zoning rules, the city planner just stamps it approved. No public hearings, no endless community debates. It turns a 5-year legal battle into an afternoon errand.
But the city demands something major in return.
What's the catch?
In exchange for bypassing that red tape, the developer has to sign a covenant agreeing that at least 50% of the units will be permanently affordable for formerly homeless or at-risk residents. And they have to lock in that affordability for 55 to 99 years.
Wow, a 99-year covenant. They are securing true long-term affordability, not just a 10-year tax credit phase-out that expires and dumps people back on the street.
Exactly. Add in the state's linkages program, which provides permanent rental assistance vouchers for roughly 350 households dealing with serious mental illness, and you have a very robust off-ramp.
This deeply innovative thinking raises the overall picture significantly as we head to the finish line. Let's bring it all together for the final summary.
Let's do it.
When we look at New Mexico, the major weaknesses are undeniably severe. You have a crushing housing affordability crisis where 83% of low-income earners are entirely cost-burdened. You have skyrocketing down payments that have completely locked out first-time buyers, and you have highly punitive criminalization tactics in the state's largest population center, Albuquerque.
Those are heavy anchors.
They are. On the other hand, the major strengths show a system trying to adapt. The state allows lenient vehicle dwelling on vast public lands. They've infused a massive $500 million in recent funding. They are utilizing highly sophisticated syndromic surveillance to track health outcomes, and they are deploying incredibly innovative zoning strategies in Las Cruces.
So taking all of that structural data into account, here are the final category grades.
Go ahead.
Housing affordability grade, F shelter access grade, C+. Criminalization and enforcement grade, D vehicle dwelling friendliness grade, B outreach and social services grade, B+. Pathways to permanent housing grade, B-.
Tallying all of those metrics together, I can reveal the final perfectly homeless state score for New Mexico is a C+.
And New Mexico receives a C+, because while the basic economic realities of acquiring housing are severely punishing, and Albuquerque continues to lean heavily on criminalization, the state infrastructure is counterbalancing this. The massive financial investments, the vehicle leniency, and pioneering permanent solutions like Camp Hope and Las Cruces elevate the final grade.
It really leaves you with a profound question to chew on as we wrap up this scorecard. If a smaller city like Las Cruces can successfully legalize and support a permanent encampment simply by shifting its zoning laws, what would happen to the national crisis if major metropolises adopted that exact same zoning playbook?
It's definitely something to think about.
That's the perfectly homeless state score for New Mexico. Thank you so much for listening. If you are finding the content interesting, please tap the like and subscribe buttons and sheet picture until next time.
If you'd like to support the project, click on over to the Perfectly Homeless Etsy store and get yourself a warm hoodie with our logo, or you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/perfectlyhomeless. Every purchase and donation helps fund future episodes in this 50-state journey through homelessness in America. Wear the logo. Start a conversation. Because homelessness isn't someone else's problem anymore. It's happening in every state, every city, and more neighborhoods than most people realize. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I'll see you in the next episode.